Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly Intel Brief. We took a little hiatus for August. We are now back in Washington. I thought I'd do a little palate cleanser and just give you a sort of state of play of what happened in Michigan, in my experience, over the month of August. Number one, the topic of conversation still for everybody is the cost of living and costs going up in every category, but in particular on the issue of healthcare. And this is because the big, beautiful bill that was signed by the president in July, the chickens are really coming home to roost as people understand what is going to happen with their healthcare. And I think in short, between the cuts to Medicaid, the cuts to the subsidies for anyone on Obamacare or the marketplace, and the fact that to compensate for those cuts, every single person I know is going to have their private insurance costs go up. People are really reeling with the fact that they are going to have to pay more for their health care come January 1. Now, we're seeing this play out in real time because most states are required to notify people when their price of their health care is going to go up as of January 1. Michiganders are already starting to get those letters. Right now, the Michigan healthcare plans, Blue Cross as an example, Meridian Health Plan, United Healthcare, are going up on average by 16%. So unfortunately, a lot of Michiganders, probably most Michiganders, are going to be getting notice this fall of a significant rate increase in your private insurance. What I'd encourage you to do is get that letter that you're going to get, black out your address and your name, and post that online. I want people to understand that the rate increase that you're getting is because of what the president has decided to do on healthcare in this country, and we shouldn't take that lying down. The way the price of healthcare affects what's going on here in Washington, and now that we're back this month, is we are facing the potential again of another government shutdown deadline on September 30th. The government runs out of money on September 30th. The president and the Republicans have not come to talk to the Democrats. We need a bipartisan way forward. If you want our votes, you got to come to us and have a negotiation, have a conversation. One of the things that the president can do in order to make this a real conversation is walk back some of those cuts to Americans' health care. Walk back some of the ways that Americans are going to feel those additional costs. He could walk back the Medicaid cuts. He could walk back the rise in price to everyone on Obamacare, and he could restore health research funding so that we can continue to invent the newest cures, the newest treatments. The second issue on security is something you can see with your own eyes when you come here to Washington, D.C. It is the president's decision to deploy the U.S. military in the streets of the District of Columbia. Just to review the bidding, the president deployed the National Guard first in Los Angeles, now in D.C. There's currently 800 officers on the streets of D.C. Their goal is to address crime and homelessness. The president first tried this in Los Angeles. He placed U.S. forces there. He has now placed them in the District of Columbia. He has declared an emergency, even though the governor and the mayor here in D.C. Had never asked for there to be an emergency declared. He is now threatening to do this in places like Chicago and Baltimore and other places. And look, we all want American cities to be safe, right? That is something that we know has been a struggle, and every American deserves to live in a safe American city. But there's a right way to go about it and a wrong way to go about it. And putting the U.S. military in uniform, armed, on the streets of our cities against the will of local authorities is not the way to do this. It's not the way to do it because of our history, right? We are who we are as a nation because British soldiers were abusing us in the streets of American cities and we kicked them out. It's not the way to do it because those uniformed military are deliberately trained not for law enforcement, not for crowd management, not for cleanup in American streets, but for protecting the U.S. homeland. The risk of some sort of cycle of escalation, some local citizen eggs them on, and there's a really strong violent response, and suddenly you've got uniformed military of the American government fighting with and arguing with U.S. citizens on the ground. It tarnishes the reputation of the military. So there's real risk here, and it runs against our tradition as a democracy to have uniformed troops walking through our streets. And again, even if you may agree with the decision of the president to put these troops there, because it's someone else's city, it's someone else's state, it opens the door for other presidents with other affiliations and other interests to put uniformed military in your town, in your state, in your city. So it's a terrible precedent to set. The U.S. Senate and the Senate Armed Services Committee should be providing oversight on the deployment of U.S. military in our cities. I have been calling on our leadership to do that. It is a responsibility of every American to watch this issue, even if it's not in your town or your neighborhood. And then lastly, on the issue of democracy, President Trump in August announced that he is leading a movement to try and end mail-in voting in our elections. Now, just to review the bidding, in 2020, mail-in voting became a much more popular thing. People wanted to be able to vote from home in a mail-in ballot. Right now in Michigan, 40% of all voters in the last election voted by mail-in ballot. Another 20% did early voting. There are entire states like Washington and Oregon that are all mail-in voting. So this is a very, very live issue. Just to make sure we all know where the pressure points are, the secretaries of state in our states are the ones who control elections. And so the president can decree an executive order, he can talk about wanting to get rid of mail-in voting, but it really is up to the states to decide how they allow people to vote legally in their state. But what we've seen is the president put pressure, particularly in Republican states, on leaders there to bend to his will and start changing the rules of their own elections. In Michigan, we won't have that problem, but we know across the country that is a real risk. Also, the president should be careful what he asks for. I think while he tried to use this issue in 2020 as an excuse for why he legitimately lost the election, there are plenty of both Democratic and Republican voters who are now normally using mail-in voting as a way to participate in our democracy. So it's not something that's divided by party. It's something that's much more balanced than I think even the president thinks. So if you care about this issue, if you're worried about this issue, you should contact your Secretary of State and make sure they are prepared and have a plan to deal with the pressure that will inevitably come from the president. We should also pay attention to the races for secretaries of state. They're not always the sexiest elections, but they're extremely important people in our states for managing our elections and our democracy. Thanks for watching. Glad to be back. Have a good rest of the week.